Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and in today's video let's talk about how pilots usually receive their aircraft. Are they cold and dark like this one, or are they already powered up? Now, this is obviously a question which varies greatly depending on the airline. For example, in some Japanese airlines, they even have people who do the entire cockpit setup so that by the time the crew boards the aircraft, they just quickly cross-check that the FMS entries are correct and do their briefing and off they go. Now, that is done because it does save some flight duty time, which otherwise would reduce the maximum length of a flight that pilots can do. Say, for example, on a night flight, you have 11 hours duty time available unless you carry a third pilot. And if you spend an hour of that in your pre-flight duties, obviously that means you can fly an hour less. But let's go over to how it's done commonly on European airlines. Now, in my previous airline, I will start with that on the Boeing 737. When we got the airplane in the morning, we usually received it cold and dark because the engineers did their work on it overnight and then they just switched the airplane off again, and that's it. Now, there have been some exceptions to that. For example, when a maintenance procedure requires a longer startup time for whatever reason, then usually you would have an engineer attending the airplane and handing it over to you in a powered up state. Now, on the noon or afternoon change of shift from the early to the late crew, typically the airplane would be kept powered in a transit turnaround state, but with the IRSs turned off, since a new IRS alignment is required anyway by procedure. Now, that was in my old airline. Now let's talk about my current airline flying the A330 long haul. And I would say that in about 80% of the cases at our home base, we get the aircraft powered up and actually attended by at least one engineer. And those would do their checks because long haul aircraft typically don't have as long ground times as short haul aircraft do. Like in my old airline on the 737, they usually stayed on the ground for 5 or 6 hours overnight and then went out again in the morning. On the long haul aircraft, that's not the case. These are flying for some 20 hours a day and then only have very little ground time. So the engineers do use whatever time they have available in order to do engineering on the aircraft and do all the standard checks that need to be done, etc. Now, this in turn means that normally the aircraft is already powered up, but on the ground power unit with the IRSs not aligned yet, since as crew we have to do that manually before a long haul flight. However, they might already have started the APU, might have started to condition the airplane so that all the cleaners have it a little bit cooler in there as well. Now, there is one exception to that. That is when we are parking on remote stands, so not at the terminal, but on outside stands. And that is usually the case when the airplane comes in from maintenance. So it's been in the hangar and underwent some larger maintenance or the regular checks that they do. Then they just tow it to an outside stand. And since the airplane came freshly out of maintenance, no engineer is going to attend that. And therefore, they will typically just shut the airplane down, make it cold and dark, and then the pilots take over from there. On outstations, it's usually a powered aircraft because the old crew will have left the plane to the engineers, but it's a short ground time anyway. We aim for 90 minutes ground time on outstations, which is the minimum that Airbus advises on the A330. And that obviously means that we are usually going to have both an engineer in attendance as well as a very short time between the old crew leaving and the new crew getting on board. Therefore, everything is going to remain powered and we are going to receive a fully powered aircraft. Now, I do hope that this sheds a little bit of insight into your flight sim operations. Obviously, this is different per airline, so in some airlines you might always get your aircraft cold and dark. In others, you will always have an engineer in attendance who is going to power the airplane up. Well, and as I explained in the beginning, in some airlines you might even have somebody who did all the pre-flight procedures for you, so that by the time you get on board, you simply do your briefing and off you go. That just gives you an idea of how different procedures can possibly be. I do hope that you enjoyed this little bit of background information. Finally, in order to apply it to your flight simulator operation, what would be the most realistic setup for your aircraft? Well, if you bought your aircraft for an early morning flight, I would personally recommend to put the airplane into a cold and dark state, especially when you're at an airport where your airline might not necessarily have maintenance available. Say, for example, sitting in a Condor A320 over here in Paderborn. Chances that they have maintenance are slimmer than, for example, in their main bases like Munich, Frankfurt, Düsseldorf, and so on. So when you are operating a flight like that, I would recommend to start cold and dark. That is probably going to be the more realistic option for you. But whenever you operate a flight starting in the afternoon or the evening, then I would recommend to start with a powered aircraft because usually that is how either the previous crew might have left it or how the engineers might have prepared it by the time that the flight crew is going to come on board. Now, I do hope that you found this one interesting. If you did, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And if there are other real world insights that you would be interested in, be sure to put it in the comments below so that I can have a look at them for future videos. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. And as always, if you're up for more, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Be sure to leave a like as it does really help out, and comment to let me know what you think. Finally, if you're really in love with what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.